Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Coffee Break 13. I am Rachel Camella, your host, and I'm here with Cindy Merkel, your moderator, as well as a few other members from the CertiPay HR team. And so we are glad you are here with us this morning. Today, we are talking about the number one question we've all been receiving this week, and that is, what if my employee is afraid to return to work? And this is a legitimate question. It's something that we've been getting. And the thing about this is the answer is different based on each individual employee's scenario. So it is very possible that your employees are fearful and don't want to return to work. But what you want to do is find out why. So that's the first thing, is have a conversation. If somebody says, hey, I'm afraid to return to work, or I'm not coming back, or I don't want to, whatever the words are, you need to be willing to have a conversation with that individual, whether it's a text chat or an email exchange, or if you just pick up the phone and call them, ask them why. Communicate with your employees here. This is the important piece, because you may be able to work through the situation and actually get them to come back. So that's the most important thing, because what you do after you receive that information will be the important part. Okay, so there may actually be some real issues. There may be a situation where the employee is concerned about how they're going to manage a situation at home, or, hold on, I'm muting people. There we go. Okay. So there may be some real situations that people are faced with, and the conversation will help you. A couple of things you really want to remember is be consistent. So even though the scenarios can have variations and some very specific differences and examples, you want to be consistent with the way you manage them. So for example, if somebody has COVID-19, then you want to make sure you do the same thing with any employee who has COVID-19. If somebody has a childcare issue, be consistent with the way you react to childcare issues. So don't just pick and choose, this is my favorite employee and therefore I'm going to make an accommodation for them that I wouldn't do for somebody else. So being consistent will be important. I also think that it will be important to offer a remote working option whenever it is possible. I know there are a lot of industries that we have, many of you on this call, who may not have remote options. The service industry, technicians who need to go into homes. There are a lot of examples where you've got to have people out in the field or they have to come to your facility. If there are any positions at all that you can make remote, even within, if you have positions where their work is a computer and a phone, let them work remotely right now. Create a scenario that thins out your office if possible. And that will make it easier for the people to come in who have to come in. And if you can create a remote workforce that sets a comfort level for the people who have the option to work from home. So if this is possible for you, think about considering that right now as a norm for particular positions. And keep in mind, FFCRA is still in place. There are a lot of cases where paid leave will be an option for some of these examples. So let's look just a little bit more. Some of the fears are getting infected or infecting others. These are legitimate possible fears and possible situations. And I want to say it doesn't really matter what your personal view is. Keep that in mind right now. It's kind of the perception. So your employees are actually feeling afraid about this. And so you have to remember to keep kind of that neutral line and understand that your employees have particular feelings about what's happening right now. So trying to minimize that and trying to make some accommodations that work across the board is this balancing act where we are. So when somebody says, well, I'm afraid to come in, I'm fearful about contracting COVID-19 at work or spreading it to other people, I'm very worried about that. This is a great conversation about your safety precautions. So what are you doing in your office to make people feel safe? What can you do to make people feel safe? The CDC has some fantastic guidelines, and CertaPay has posted some of these on our website, and we have other webinars talking about the safety precautions you can take and safety precautions you can add. We would encourage you to add as many as you can. If you add specific protective equipment for people, if you provide it for them, or if you require it. We spoke to somebody just this week, and they had a particular employee who they wanted to return to the office, but she just did not feel safe in the environment. And the difference was simply adding masks inside the building. So if people were at their desks, they were not required to wear the mask, but as soon as they were up and moving about the building, they were. And that made the difference. She was going to return to work at that point. Now, that may or may not make a difference. Maybe an employee is just going to say, I don't want to, or whatnot. But have the conversation, add as much as you can. And then if the employee feels safer based on these precautions you're taking, they're more likely to return. Talk about remote options again. If certain positions can be pushed out remote, then right now that might be the best thing to do for those positions, because not only does that create a comfort level for the particular employees who have the option to work remotely, but again, that thins out the office. So now you could be operating maybe at 50% capacity, really creating some social distance in your space, and that makes other employees feel comfortable. So there are things you can do to create a safe environment where the people will feel safe to return. Unemployment eligibility can be changed. The status can be changed if you've got a position for somebody, you've taken all the precautions, you're doing everything you can, and the employee still chooses not to return. That can affect whether or not they will get unemployment benefits, because that would mean they are refusing an offer of work. And so that can be an issue. And sometimes, again, having the conversation where they understand, you've been offered work. We have a safe environment here. There's no reason to not return. We have social distance. We have all these accommodations. There's no reason to not return. And in those cases, a refusal to work can actually equal a resignation. And if somebody resigns and they say, I'm not coming to work, you've offered me a job and I'm not coming back, that's a resignation. And with a resignation like that, the unemployment benefits, the eligibility may be called into question there. So there also may be paid leave options under FFCRA or unpaid leave options with your company. So if somebody says, listen, I don't want to come back, you say, I understand, that's fine. However, we want you back. So when you are able and willing to return, please reach out to us. We're just going to mark you as an unpaid leave, and that's fine. You have the option to do that. But what I want to remind you is what I said on the first slide, is be consistent. So if you are saying that to one person, say it to everybody. We understand if you're not comfortable working right now, we get it. And if you just say, we're going to offer X number of weeks of unpaid leave for anybody who is currently not comfortable to return, that's up to you. You're allowed to do that, but be consistent with that. Be careful about, don't offer it to one person and not others. Make sure if that's something that you're going to do, offer it across the board to everybody in that same position, similar positions, or whatever makes sense to be consistent. How we doing, guys? Any questions?
We're good, Rach. Keep going.
All right. So one of the main questions we're getting right now is, what about school? So we have such a mix across the country. And so one of the important things is going to be check with your state's guidelines. There are some different things out there. There are a lot of states. We aren't back in session yet. Schools have not begun yet, but we're approaching that point. You know, most schools start returning in August. And so there's kind of this battle going on right now. Are we returning? Are we partially returning? Are we staying online? What's happening? And the fact of the matter is we aren't sure. So pay attention to your state's guidelines and understand what's happening in your state. So you really have three situations. Either it's going to be, we're going back, everybody's going back, be ready, or we're going to keep, create social distance in our buildings by having 50% remote, 50% online, or it's going to be all remote for the time being. So it's going to be somewhere in there. And with these different scenarios, FFCRA can be superimposed on top of that to create the possibility of paid leave. Also, on top of that will be some people who are refusing to come back to work because they're going to make the choice to not send their kids. So this is where these conversations are going to be critical. And it will be important to have the conversation with the employees to figure out exactly which one of these situations is happening. So if the school if the state is saying that our schools are going to remain online, and now your employees are going to have a childcare issue because all the kids are home from school and they're trying to figure out how to do that, then we need to go back to some of these other conversations. You want to look at remote options if you can. You want to look at FFCRA. If they have not already used their limit of what's allowed, they may be eligible for some paid leave under that FMLA expansion portion. And if they have reached their limit and they still don't want to return, then that's a potential time where you would offer some unpaid leave, or maybe some part-time where they come in, don't come in, up to you, or possibly even that would be equal to a resignation if they are not going to return. So the conversations need to be had when we actually get to this point. And so, you know, actually, I just want to go back to this for a second, because in the case where all the kids are going back to school and the states are saying, nope, schools are open, we're going back. In these cases, the expansion under FMLA paid leave will not apply because the schools are open and operating. And so if parents choose not to send their children to those states where schools are open and operating, then the DOL has said that the FFCRA will not apply in these cases because they have the option to send their children to school. And if they choose not to, the paid leave will not apply to them. And that is, again, according to today's guidelines and what we know right now. So pay attention to the next 2 weeks. I think we're going to see some changes to new bills, some new guidelines that may come out. I think the next 2 weeks are going to be really important. So stay tuned. We will give you an update when we know more, but pay attention to your state's guidelines and be ready in the next 2 weeks to start having the conversations with your employees about coming back, not coming back, what's happening in the different things. Again, as I've said in previous weeks, trust your employees. And document all these situations, whatever happens. You know, be mindful that employees are worried right now and you've got some different scenarios. So trust your employees and just document the information that happens. And finally, do the best you can. We know it's a lot. We know there's a lot going on. And CertaPay is here for you. We appreciate and value your business, and we are glad you are here with us. So don't worry, we're going to continue to help you through this situation. And once again, thank you so much for joining us for Coffee Break. So any questions?
The only question I have, Rachel, if they opt for unpaid leave, how do you handle their health care coverage that the company pays for?
Okay, so that's an interesting one because it kind of depends on your company's policies and your benefits, and what the precedence is. So what have you done in the past? What is the plan there? And it's a good question for your broker. You might reach out to your broker and specifically ask that question for you and for your company. I will say kind of a general statement about that is if somebody is not working, then they can't remain on your plan, and somebody might be eligible for COBRA under that scenario because if you don't have a leave policy in place or you don't have something already set and established. So be careful about doing that, but reach out to your broker for a specific scenario for you guys and how to navigate through that.
Rachel, that was actually the only question I have other than where can the coffee breaks be found. Everyone, they can be found on our website under the news tab at the very bottom. So if you go to the
That's right.
I did just get another question, Rachel. Currently,
Okay.
If someone tests positive for COVID, what are our requirements as an employer?
Okay, so if one of your employees tests positive, the first thing is they should not be in the workplace. They should be at home, and they would be eligible for paid leave under the FFCRA. So provided they have not used any leave before, they would be eligible for up to 80 hours of pay. And so, speaking to that, the hours are considered to be an average. So if somebody works 40 hours a week, then they're eligible for 2 weeks at 40 hours a week. If they only work 32 hours a week, then that's their average. They would get 32 hours a week the first and 32 hours the second week. And also the pay is an average. So you would take a 6-month look back on pay, include commissions, tip dollars, bonus dollars, anything, create an average amount, and that would be their pay for the average hours for each week. So as soon as somebody tests positive, that's the first thing. Let's get that FFCRA form, fill it out. Employee has tested positive. They're eligible for 2 weeks of full pay. That is capped at $511 a day. Now, the next thing you want to look at is exposure to other employees. So how closely did that individual work to other employees in your building? Do you need to take a look at the window of time where the employee was working and may have been contagious in your building? And how did they have close and continuous contact with a number of employees? And so then you would have to take a look at those employees and see, would it be necessary? Does anyone else have symptoms? Do you need to take some cleaning and sanitizing precautions for your building? So go in layers. First thing is deal with the individual employee. Next thing is how much exposure was there? And then finally, take a look at cleaning the building and keeping everybody else safe.
Rachel, next question. If a spouse tests positive, can we require employee to stay home?
So when a spouse is positive, you are allowed to require somebody to stay home. That is up to you. However, it doesn't automatically mean that employee qualifies for paid leave. So if you want to pay them while they're out, that's entirely up to you. What I would say is, can the employee work remotely? If they've got a spouse who's positive, is it possible for them to self-quarantine for 14 days while still working from home? That would be a great option if you can do that. If that is not an option, then find out what are the safety precautions they have been taking, and what safety precautions can you take? If you have to keep this employee working, is it possible? And so I just want to throw out, the CDC says they should stay home and self-quarantine for 14 days. Under FFCRA, it does not qualify for paid leave. It will only then switch to being qualified for paid leave if the individual now has symptoms or test positive themselves. So there's a little bit of a crossover there where we've got some gray area in the middle, and you can decide. You can pay the individual and say, we don't want to risk it, stay home. You could see if they've got other leave available to them. If they can work from home, that's always a great option. So think about some different possibilities there. If the employee has to stay in the office, to create social distance from other employees, use all kinds of sanitizer and cleaning methods, use PPE, whatever you can to keep the employee safe and your other employees safe.
Next question, Rachel. If an employee is tested positive for COVID, but they're asymptomatic, if they're asymptomatic, can they still work remotely as opposed to being paid the COVID sick pay?
Sure. If anybody can work remotely, and that's the way you want to do it, that's absolutely fine to do. Now, they would qualify under FFCRA to get that paid leave, meaning that if they are unable to work and you keep them out for 2 weeks, they'd be eligible for that pay. Or if they can just continue working, they're asymptomatic, they've got a 14-day window and they can work from home, there's no reason they can't do that.
Next question. We paid someone FFCRA wages when their spouse tested positive because the spouse's doctor told our employee to quarantine.
Okay, so if an individual is told to quarantine by a healthcare provider, that qualifies for paid leave under FFCRA. So you're okay there.
Next question.
And there's a difference between, oh, sorry, I was just going to kind of expand on that.
Okay.
So there's a difference between a broad statement where the CDC says, we think everybody should self-quarantine if they traveled, or if a particular body says everybody over the age of 65 should self-quarantine. You know, there's a difference between a blanket statement versus an individual. So FFCRA is specific to individuals, and this is how you can tell the difference. So with that example, a healthcare provider specifically told that individual to self-quarantine, and that's where the qualifications come from. If it was a broad statement, the CDC says if your spouse is positive, you should self-quarantine for 14 days. That's not the same thing. If you're told directly by a healthcare provider to quarantine, then FFCRA paid leave kicks in.
Rachel, this is back to the asymptomatic individual. It says, if an employee goes to get tested and they have not experienced any symptoms, what are our obligations to let them work from home? They have not received the results.
Okay, so this is a good one because this is a case where you want to have the conversation. What is happening? Why did the employee go get tested in the first place? So this may be an individual who's just afraid. And so they're worried about things. They went to get tested. And, you know, if you can narrow it down, you might find out, well, I have an elderly parent who I care for. I can't risk that individual getting sick. I'm taking precautions. So the conversation will give you a lot more information. And when an employee just says, I'm going to get tested, but they haven't been exposed, they don't have a positive spouse, they don't have these other pieces, they're probably just worried. So they don't qualify for paid leave under FFCRA just because they went to get tested. And even though as soon as you go to a testing facility, they say everybody has to self-quarantine, but that's not an FFCRA qualifying event. So have the conversation, figure out what's really going on, and maybe you can create some precautions in the workplace that will help ease the mind of that particular individual, and maybe not. And maybe you want to just say, you know what, anybody who is in this certain position, category can work from home periodically if you need to, or whatever it is. So you need to get information on that and figure out what's really going on. Just going to get a test when there are no symptoms and no real reason to do that doesn't automatically qualify somebody for paid leave.
Okay, next question. It says, sorry, it says we are going to slowly phase back employees into the office 2 days a week using CDC guidelines. Do waivers actually offer employers any legal protection?
And by waivers, you mean you're asking employees to sign a waiver when they return?
That was my assumption. I was just emailing. Joseph, can you type in what you mean by a waiver, please?
Yeah, he said yes. Okay, so I would caution against that because OSHA guidelines very specifically state that we are obligated to provide a safe working environment for our employees. So having a waiver would be contradictory to OSHA guidelines. So I would be very careful about those kinds of measures when it is your responsibility as a business owner to create the safe environment.
Rachel, just for conversation's sake, what about some sort of health questionnaire that the employee is signing?
Okay, so that's a good point, Cindy. Thank you. Perfect. Because instead of something like a waiver, what you might do is have some safety training and have precautions in place and have your employees acknowledge that they will follow your safety protocols. That would probably give you kind of the balance of what you're looking for without putting yourself in a bad position. In addition, you might have each employee start their shift or their day with a questionnaire like Cindy's mentioning. So you might have a questionnaire with 4 or 5 questions about their health. Do you have a fever? Have you had a sore throat or a cough? Do you have any COVID symptoms? And start each shift or day with kind of the general questions where the employees acknowledge that they're well. So you have a couple of things you can do that will help not only protect you, but again, you want to create an environment where people feel safe. If they feel comfortable and they feel like you're doing everything you can, they're going to want to return.
Okay, folks, any more questions? That was the last one I had.
And I did see the questions about the webinars on the website. Our intention is to have all of the coffee breaks up. So Cindy and I will go back and touch base and we'll make sure that all of these are on the website for you guys. And I know the majority of them are up there. We'll go back and double check, but this one should be up there before the end of the day, and we'll make sure the rest are up as well. And as always, you guys, please reach out to us with your questions. We look forward to these every week, and I think a lot of you look forward to them as well. And again, thank you so much for joining us. CertaPay is here for you. We will help you get through this, and we appreciate and value you and your business. So thank you so much.
I do have one last question that came through. Where do you suggest keeping questionnaires? We just have it posted in our break room. We do not have employees fill it out daily, lots of paper.
Sure, any reason to not have additional paper is a good idea. So you can do some different things. You can have it be an electronic form that goes directly to a secure file in some way. You want to remember this is basically health information as well, so you have to be careful about how you store it. Perhaps you just make it a verbal conversation, or you simply ask people, these are the questions. If you say yes to any of these, please reach out to the HR department, or please reach out to your manager or something, so that instead of having a bunch of paperwork flowing in every day, you can just tell people, can you answer no to all these questions? If you answer yes, reach out to us. And so that might be a better approach.
Just one thing, everyone, I do not need your emails unless you are not getting our invitations. As we've posted all the webinars on the website now, I will no longer personally be sending them out. So again, unless you're just not getting the invitations, I would be more than happy to fix that. One last question though, the question is there an application you recommend that could be automated via text daily? I do not know of any text application currently for a questionnaire like that. Do you, Rachel? Is there any apps that you know of?
I don't know of one that I would actually recommend, but you might just kind of do some digging on there and see if there's just like a basic, all you need is a couple of questions. So there might be some kind of app that works in that format where you can, you know, just have the message go out. And I'm not sure about it.
That was the last question I have, and I did capture the email addresses. I will verify that you are on the mailing list.
Fantastic. Cheers, everybody. I hope you enjoy your coffee and your coffee break with us. We'll see you next week.